We're back in Fallout 4 doing a comparison. Both of these are on Xbox Series X. On the left, we have simply the 60 FPS mod on, and on the right, we're running the FPS boost. So for context, the one on the left is running a native 4K resolution at 60 FPS. Both have HDR. On the right, it's dropped down to 1080 at 60 FPS with the FPS boost. So yeah, it's a bit of a huge drop. Not only do we have a lower resolution on the right, we also have a worse rendering distance, like a load-in, if that makes sense. So you're going to see that in certain objects in the environment, how they take, you have less of a draw distance, you don't get as much rendering in. So yeah, it's definitely quite a bit disappointing and even more noticeable, at least to me, when you kind of do a stacked side by side. Now, these types of videos are a lot of work, so liking the video would be great because, again, there's a lot more effort involved in this sort of thing. Subscribing is great too. But yeah, I've set up some side by side comparisons. We're starting with one of the more detailed environments, at least I think so, and that is Nuka World. Running through a couple of the areas, and then we're going to show off some different spots throughout the regular world of Fallout. So keep in mind, again, on the left, the only thing I've had on there mod-wise, and these are using the same save files, which is like a modded save file, so you're going to see things such as like God mode being inherited because that's on, and then I've turned off all the mods on both sides, just with the left running purely the 60 FPS option. So I thought that was the best way to kind of stack these side by side because we've seen the game running at 4K 60, so we know that it can, and for the most part it honestly seems to hit that target. And I think I've actually lined these up pretty well side by side doing some different things. You're not really going to see combat as to say, but you will see some shots going off back and forth on some spots. Anyways, I thought Nuka World was a good showcase because it's quite dense in some areas, but it's also got some nice open spots, and there's not necessarily as many enemies that are going to cause problems. And yes, we are doing both first person and third person moments too, because people play Fallout in different ways, and I think it's important to show off both options. So yeah, it's such a weird choice. Now I think they were trying to go for like a locked 60 FPS entirely the whole way through, even with some mods, and I don't know if that was necessarily the best choice for doing the FPS boost for the longevity of the experience, in my opinion. I'm alright with the drop here and there. I know maybe some people aren't, but to have that overhead, to have the 4K and the 60 in the long term, is better. Because even if the Series X can't necessarily handle that, someday there will be a more powerful console that will perfectly deliver that. And now we just don't have that option because I don't think it's going to happen, but the Bethesda mods could vanish because their online store set up, and it just would be such a shame to lose the 4K 60 in Fallout 4. It would be a complete travesty, quite honestly, for this game, just in terms of long-term preservation, because it may not seem like a big deal now, but we're still playing old games. We're still playing Fallout 3, we're still playing New Vegas, we're still playing like Morrowind and Skyrim, like decades later probably. We will still be playing these games, and preservation wise, losing that is just going to be, if it happens, such a disappointment. And I mean, it could get remastered at some point. There's all these like ifs and buts, but you get the gist of what I'm going for, I hope. So the next setup is we're back to the Sanctuary, and I tried my best also time of day wise to get these things fairly lined up. This one's a little bit harder because I do a little trip through the forest, and it's just like, I'm trying my best to keep things relatively even. And we will do some close-ups with people as well. But here, you should be able to notice sometimes when we're moving through it how certain objects are appearing on the left but not on the right, and as we get closer on the right, some of the objects are appearing. And that's, it just hurts the immersion a little bit, at least for me. And I know most people, maybe they won't notice that, but when you're putting them side by side here, you can clearly see some of the smaller details sort of being, left out because you have to travel a little bit further. It's really quite a perplexing change. And I don't know if it's showing as much resolution-wise, But when you play the game and you play both options, it's so noticeable having this resolution adjustment between the two. And I don't know if I'm crazy in that regard, but it seems like such a less vibrant and lively world to me. And that's just, my thoughts on it. But yeah, these side-by-sides, they're kind of fun to do because you're directly able to see, some of the changes and the differences between them. And I think that's kind of a good way to do so. And I hope I've picked some decent spots throughout this that kind of, provide different looks at the general world of Fallout 4. Just places that I think are kind of important. And we're going to be doing some stills as well later on because I'm trying to, compare them the best that I can think of when I'm playing these games, just for memory and stuff. Because it's always fun playing Fallout 4. I love this title. I really do. But yeah, it's just like there's just not as much quality to it. And these were both shot on the Xbox DVR for context too. I tried to make this as even as a comparison as I possibly could. So this is one of the combat scenarios where you can see, because I was like, I've disabled, all the mods, but yet clearly God mode's still on because I'm taking damage, but I'm not hurt at all, which is interesting. Although I could take rad damage, which was interesting as well. Definitely a fascinating comparison. Oh, and then I'm on fire on the left. Something about the higher level fluidity in this game is really cool. It's just like the combat and stuff, but it's kind of like any game, but just the fire and everything is like, it looks really cool and feels a lot better to be moving at the quicker pace. Yeah, definitely a great comparison here, because I'm assuming this is kind of a road and a setup that maybe a lot of people kind of experience when they're playing Fallout. Just kind of going along the side, because not every moment of Fallout is like intense gripping combative action. Sometimes you're wandering through the wasteland, at least when you start. Once you get all the fast traveling and stuff, that obviously changes your journey. And then I think I get stuck on one of those things that's like barreling by in a little bit here, and I'm just like, oh, jeez. Trying my best to get these comparisons going. And I think the right kind of looks a little duller in some places, just like a weird extra level of dullness to it. I can't quite explain. It just doesn't seem as vibrant color-wise. It's probably the 4K. Right there, I get stuck and I'm like, come on. I'm just trying to set these up here, and I was like, you know what, this is a fine kind of set by set here. It's not too much longer for this segment, so I was just like, yeah, it gets a little evened up because something on the right goes on. I get stuck on stuff, and it's just like, it is what it is. That's the biggest thing here. But it's really neat setting up these comparisons and seeing the differences in the games. And you never know what you're going to get too, because, on the right we've got like a weather variant coming, and on the left it keeps to be like a warmy day. And timeline-wise, I believe these should be about the exact same, just based on the save that I used to get to both of these. You would assume, that they're relatively comparable in terms of what's going to happen. And again, I tried my best to actually make that possible. I guess I could have lined it up a little bit better here, but it's not the biggest deal. Other things are going to be lined up too. Even better. Anyways, kind of cool. Let's swap over to what a lot of people say is one of the more hardcore parts of the game for frame rate, and that is where the Swan is in the downtown area. At least that's what people always mentioned when I first showed off Fallout. They wanted to see on the Series X. They were like, well, how does it run in this spot? And yeah, this is the path I chose. I think I run by this one each time. If you notice my videos, my past stuff, I tend to visit the same types of locations so that you could see more of the effect between them as you're going along in these worlds. Although I would have liked to have more of the, I don't know what you'd describe it as. It's like the sun has a neat effect on it on the right-hand side, whereas the left it's a little bit more cloudy out. At least the shadows seem somewhat consistent between the two regardless, which is nice. And then, of course, getting bitten by a dog. Oh, also for context, the audio is coming from the left side, in case you were wondering about that, as I know some people do wonder as well. Yeah, definitely quite a difference in the world. At least I hope that's coming across when you're watching this. And I don't think I've ever taken this path before, like, under the, well, where the overpass is. I don't think I've ever gone into this little area here before, which is neat. I always love playing Fallout and being like, oh, here's a slightly new area I haven't been. Wow, this game is insanely big. Which is, I guess, kind of the wonder of it, the fact that you could play it and play it and play it, and there's just, you know, there's always new spots. At least for most regular players. I'm sure the most hardcore out there probably has seen, like, everything, but you know what I get, or you get what I mean. Now we're swapping over to a classic scene, so this is Diamond City, obviously, one of the most visited spots I think you visit in the game. You spend a lot of time here, taking a look at things, running the shops, so this is just like a still. And now we're swapping over to a place in Salem, I guess, near the Witchcraft Museum. Piper's always a problem in these comparisons. She's never going where she's supposed to. We have a little fun part at the end kind of showing that off. And now we're going to a really different place. This is a close-up comparison of just kind of a person, if that makes sense, because I thought that might be a neat little thing to show off. And in general, I hope you enjoyed this Fallout comparison. You know, I think I kind of shown it off well, and hopefully I'll be comparing other titles as well. You know, if you have ideas for that, I'd love to hear them, as, you know, I like to do these side-by-sides with what I have and seeing them in action. And the Piper part, she just would not look at me on the left. I don't know if that's part of the mod or not.